I spoke earlier about some of the good fortune that has followed the ECA through our brief history in events like this. Well, one of the big critical strokes of luck that we encountered, and I believe luck is when what happens when preparation meets opportunity. But for us, we got very lucky when one of our founders, Mike Robbins, who you met earlier, introduced us to James Dobbin. Jim is a world pioneer in strategic spatial development planning. His original and visionary research at Harvard in the mid-1970s propelled not only others, but his own private sector career, leading Dobbin International, where he and his team have led well over 100 complex, large-scale projects for clients like the UN and World Bank, many of them at the country scale. If we needed some scientific and technical skills, we found the right guy. This is incredible, being here in Collingwood and being able to tap into this kind of talent here. I want to turn it over to Jim to lead off some of the amazing work that he's been doing, and then Jarvis and Carolyn are going to carry on with how we've gone from the H and where we go from here as far as some of our scientific work goes. Then we're going to wrap it up. We're going to bring up all of our moderators here, and you're going to be able to ask us any questions about anything you want, and we'll take it from there. So let's give Jim Dobbin a great big hand. Jim, there you go. Jim, was the H not scientific enough for you?
Actually, you did a great job. It turns out it was very close to what we found after doing intense work for about 6 months. So congratulations. Well, thank you very much, Bruce. I'm really delighted to be here, and we've got just a few insights of this great project that we undertook last year. We started last July in 24, finished around Christmas, and I think that if I can just go here, last year at the summit, I presented this map. We were just starting the project, but just look at that region. You've got the Greenbelt or the Niagara Escarpment. Okay, the Greenbelt, the Niagara Escarpment in orange. And look at all the rivers that are flowing out of the escarpment. Look at the ANSIs these are areas of natural scientific interest, the yellow areas. They're just scattered all over the landscape. ANSIs are really important areas that are not protected and they're not connected. We also have the forests in green and we have the wetlands in blue. And the region is 185,000 hectares. It's defined by the watersheds. The watersheds are basically a natural boundary crossing administrative counties, Grey County, Grey Highlands, and Simcoe, crossing also the Nottawasaga Valley Conservation Authority and Grey Sauble. But it's a natural boundary. Since we're looking for ecological corridor, we need to have natural boundaries to start with. It's also a subset of the Georgian Bay Geopark, so this fits within part of the geopark. So that's where we started, and at that time I said, this is a very complex landscape. It's going to be very complicated, and I really was an understatement because it is even more as we got into the details of it. So I just, so how do we, I'm going to highlight some of the findings that we had about the landscape, about the watersheds, some significance about the watersheds, land use, land cover, and really the big story was water, the actual headwaters, and where they're located and their density. So let me go on with that. And this is a very, how do we approach it? Okay, we create a comprehensive geodatabase. This is all the data that we think is necessary to develop a corridor strategy. And in the first column, we're identifying biodiversity and all the biodiversity assets in the region on maps all to the same scale, so we can start to combine them and overlay them. And the hydrological features and the fact that this whole thing is a karst landscape. We also start to look at connectors, and when we show water as least cost, we're not talking about money, we're talking about the ease of movement of species across water and across wetlands and through forests and fields. So we have this other layer of information, and within that we develop a model. It's a model where we can give different weightings to different factors, and we can come up with a series of scenarios of the best way animals can move between areas of high biodiversity. So it's this is a very simplistic view of the model. And then to help organize ourselves, as I said, the whole outer boundary is based on the watersheds. That is, all the water that is in this region flows into the Southern Georgian Bay area. So we have 5 watersheds, and we have the Big Head River and Meaford and the Beaver Valley and Beige, and we have the Beaver, the Eugenia Lake, the Mad Rivers to the east, and then we have the shoreline watersheds. They're all very different. They all have different levels of forest cover, land use activities, and they represent kind of the foundation for looking for corridors. Now, the green areas here are, through our model, are the areas that we identified as being really highly important areas of high biodiversity, and the blue are just conceptual corridors that could be used to connect these areas. The Bruce Trail is shown in purple, so the watersheds are a very important way of analyzing the region. I think that one of the highlights is that when we look at Castle Glen, it's located exactly where 3 of the 5 watersheds meet. So it's really important as a headwater for 3 watersheds going down into Collingwood and flowing back through Beaver River. So that was rather interesting. And then we look at the satellite imagery, and just to get a sense of what this region is made up of, we have 60% of the land is in agriculture. And when you start to, that leaves 40% to do something in other than agriculture. So assuming that you keep the agriculture, if you take away the protected areas, the steep cliffs and the wetlands that are protected, and we're probably talking about 30% of this land is available for development. So it really points to trying to do more regenerative, resilient kind of agriculture, as well as doing better planning than what we're seeing. So this is an inset. You can see the geopark is the orange and red in the bottom inset map. So this shows you where the ECA corridor sits within the framework. This was one of the most surprising things. Since we had the elevation, the top topography and the elevations throughout the region, we knew where all the rivers were. We just kind of moved up the rivers to see where the water was sourced. Where did it all come from? So those blue dots on the map indicate all the headwaters within the region for every river and stream. And then we did a density analysis of those dots to say, well, these are the darkest blue are areas where you have the biggest recharge. And it's very interesting because if you look at the orange boundary, that's a proxy for the brow to toe of the escarpment. Most of these areas are right, the source waters are right on the escarpment, either going north to the Georgian Bay or flowing back and around and back out to the bay through other ways. So that was really interesting. I don't think that those sources are protected beyond Greenbelt and the Biosphere Reserve, but I don't think there's any particular attention being put on those. And then if you look at what those headwaters do, they support, of course, the ANSIs, the areas of natural scientific interest, the forest and the wetlands downstream. So it's not just protecting those downstream things, but the most important thing is to make sure we're protecting those areas. And of course, the headwaters support all the rivers and streams throughout the areas and support the communities, the towns and villages, Collingwood and Thornbury and Meaford downstream. So we have to really pay attention to that, to these source headwaters. So our model came up with this diagram. It's a schematic, but it's based on the models. And you can see the green represents the areas of highest biodiversity. The blue are the proposed corridors. So there's a whole network of potential corridors here. The one thing that we, because of the importance of the rivers and the source waters, is we put riparian corridors into this mix, because the rivers and streams are naturally some of the most biodiverse areas in the region. And we're working with Mark Heaton and Corey Stinson, and it's really, their work has shown that the river valleys and the rivers are so important. So riparian corridors really need to be given a lot more attention than they have been. I just wanted to take a sidestep on this and then describe a situation. I was working on a World Bank project and CETA project in Malawi in 1994. And I was working with Dr. John Wilson, who's a fisheries expert and had been there, grew up there, went educated in the UK, and he said, Jim, did you know that every one of these rivers that we're seeing now flowed year-round, and all of them flowed into Lake Nyasa, or Lake Malawi, year-round? That meant that the women could get their water right there in their village. They could get their protein from the freshwater salmon when they moved upstream. And it was really an idyllic environment. Well, how did that happen? Well, the British were in power, and they had this two-chain regulation that you had to have two chains on each side of the riverbank. It's 133 feet, totally vegetated. You can't remove any of the vegetation. So 10 years later, 1994, when I was there, the rivers, very few rivers flowed into the lake. And what had happened is the deputy ministers and ministers, who all had tobacco plantations, decided to get rid of the buffer. They removed all the vegetation, and the first rain swept all the sand into the rivers, and the rivers became plugged up. There was no canopy on the trees or over the rivers to provide shade. So the results were women had to walk 4 hours each way to get water with a bucket on their head. They couldn't get water right there. There was no protein. And the level of poverty was just incredible. But just think 10 years by not managing that resource. So I think that that's something that I know the Blue Mountain Watershed Trust has been doing all kinds of work in this area, but I put a lot more emphasis on those corridors as well as the ECA corridors. Another story, I hate to kind of bring this up, but in the early 70s, I worked with a landscape architecture firm in downtown Toronto, Strong Moorhead, or Moorhead and Strong Moorhead, I guess. They had several names. Anyway, I was working on Fathom 5 Provincial Park and Grossmore National Park and the master plan for the CN Tower. But back in the office, other people were working on Castle Glen. And I didn't have anything to do with it. But I did go and look over their shoulders and looked at what they were doing. So they created the master plan. And they were using 1950, 1960 orthophotos and maps. And just think of the scale they were working at was 1 to 25,000, meaning 1 inch on the drawing was equal to 25,000 inches on the ground. And they were using elevations of about 10 feet. So, you know, it made the land look like it was very easily built. It didn't look like there was many slopes whatsoever. So I came here 3 years ago, and I saw the master plan. And I said, wow, I think we may have a problem because it looks like it's about a 15% slope for the whole thing, because, you know, that had prevailed. But Bruce took me for a hike. And we were walking down through the area, and I noticed that within 100 feet, this landscape was like an accordion. It did this. And so that the traditional mapping never caught the detail and the resolution that was needed to be able to say this place is really not buildable. So what we have here, so we got access to 5 centimeter, 0.5 centimeter LiDAR imagery and have applied it to Castle Glen. So you can see all the red areas are greater than 15% slope, meaning that you cannot, I didn't mean to go back, you can't build on about 60% of that land. And that's a really amazing application of new technology to bring to the table to, you know, be able to build the argument. So we not only, Castle Glen is the cornerstone of 3 watersheds that has all these headwater spots on here. It's very steep land and probably would make a very good provincial park. It's not going to make a good project for development. So I hope this gives you just a brief idea of what the project was about. There's all kinds of other findings and other things, but the main thing is we have a hugely complex, gorgeous region, and we have to do a better job of managing it. And I think ECA is in a great position to help make that happen through the alliances that we have. Good, thank you.
Thank you so much, Jim. And I think one of the things on the note of water and Castle Glen, and Jody used the term this morning, hydrological apex. Very cool. We'll look at that a little bit more in a second. So we're going to move into the next phase of our work here, but I want to thank Jim again and his team for helping us gather all this data. We gathered data from the counties, conservation authorities, as well as Bruce Trail, Escarpment Biosphere Conservancy, who's here today, to create this great compilation of data. And we couldn't have done it without the funding of the Greenbelt Foundation, as well as the RBC Foundation Tech for Nature Fund. So thank you again to those 2 funders who really invested in this work. So now I want to take you on a journey. We're going to look at a little bit more mapping, but we're now realizing that, and this was sort of happening this past spring, that we had all this information that Jim and the team brought for us. What do we do now? And we made the decision, we think it's time to get going. We've got a good amount of data here. We know about some opportunities, and this is where the land trust idea started to percolate, that we needed to get a little bit more involved. And so we're going to show you a little bit of some different variations of some of the maps you just saw, but talk about some of the areas we want to focus, and then how we're going to get there, how we're going to do this. So here we are, South Georgian Bay. Just a refresh for you here. In this satellite image, the leaves are off. And here we are, leaves off again, looking at what we now call our area of influence. Very similar to what Jim was just showing us as our study area, but slightly expanded to include the Pine River sub-watershed. And in a moment, I want to show you why. And here we are with the leaves on, maybe imagine late June. So you can just see the colors popping and all the amounts of deciduous forest that really spring out at that time of year. Now, if we strip all of that off and look at our shape again here, and this is again with the Pine River, you can see in the bottom right, that southeast corner river, that's the Pine. We've added that in, and just how many major river systems there are in this area. And now we're going to start adding in some data layers. So right here, we've added in provincial parks, protected areas, as well as the crown lands that are the hashed out. And you can see a big block of the crown lands that are in the lower Beaver Valley lowlands, as well as Kolapur in the center, which is really the center of the H, the heart of the corridor area. Let's add on some topography, and you can really see the shape of the land coming to life. And now we're adding in those green polygons, which are taken from the data that Jim's team put together. So these are our areas of important biodiversity or eco hotspots, as I think he called them. And you can see in that bottom right southeast corner why we decided to add in the Pine River, because that's that huge linear, horizontally wide, just south of Honeywood, Pine River area. Mansfield Outdoor Center is there, Mansfield Ski Club, Dufferin County Forest, and so on, and so much wonderful escarpment land that connects up to the Creemore area. And now we are adding in some of the information based on the Dobbin aqua blue lines that we saw that could be potential corridor connectors based on the idea of ease of movement, cost ease of movement for wildlife. And what we've done here is we've looked at it a little more broadly. And I apologize if you can't see it quite as well. It might be a bit better on this screen. It's the lighter shade of green. So these are areas that we are considering areas of opportunity because they are buffers around areas of key biodiversity and opportunity for connection. And so these are some of the areas that we know there is important ecological biodiversity. Now, there are a lot of gaps on here, and this is something I think Jim alluded to. So one of the learnings from this exercise was that there's a lot of information that isn't in the provincial databases. That doesn't mean that we don't have. A lot of people, I think, live in this area right now. You've seen how rich the area is, how many, we've got eagles flying around. We are very biodiversity rich, but not all of it has been captured, so we need to do some more work. So this map is not the corridor, and a year ago I might have said, next year we're coming to you with a map of the corridor. Well, I was wrong. It could become a protected corridor, but right now these are areas where there are existing natural corridors, but a lot of them are not protected. So this is information that we will use to guide and inform the work that we are doing. It does not mean that we won't do scientific research, we won't talk with landowners in other areas. We 100% will. There's a lot of extremely important areas of opportunity and ecological value that are not in these shaded areas, but they're just not in those provincial databases. So for example, all of the major rivers or riparian corridors, creeks and streams, those are all key corridors, and many of them are quite alive and healthy and active right now. And we'll get to that. And one more, if we add on our development hotspots that we're concerned about at Castle Glen and Talisman, you can see them there at scale. And again, Castle Glen, in this one, you can't see the watershed basin division, but it touches 3 different watershed basins, which makes it that hydrological apex that Jody talked about. And this isn't on the map, but hugely important. I think we have some friends from the Blue Mountain Watershed Trust here who were responsible for having the Silver Creek wetlands just on the west side of Collingwood identified as provincially significant wetlands, and that's something that we want to talk and do more with. And so a nod to them for all of their great work. This didn't pop up on the map I just showed you because those areas of important biodiversity were all compilations of multiple data layers. So Jim, often requiring maybe 10 data sets or something like that. So in this area, we know there's species at risk and significant wildlife habitat. However, they may not have had as many different documented layers to get them to pop up on the area. But we know, thanks to the Blue Mountain Watershed, that this is an important area. And so as an example, there could be some opportunities following Silver Creek and Black Ash Creek, down running, which both drain out of the Lake of the Clouds in Castle Glen, running down the slopes there and out to Silver Creek. So that could be an area that we are interested in exploring with landowners and municipalities there. So that's the mapping portion, and we can pull a couple up after during our Q&A. But now we'd like to talk about, and we are winding down on time here, what do we do with all this information? Where do we go from here?